Today on Wavelength, we have a very special guest, Malinauskas, our new South Australian Labor Premier, to shed some light on some youth community issues.
Well, thanks very much, Cass. Yeah, look, I'm very humbled to have been elected as the new Premier of South Australia. It's a really extraordinary responsibility that has been invested in me, but one that I want to use as best as I can to have positive change on people's lives. And throughout the campaign, I made it clear that our clear focus is the next generation of South Australians.
A recent cost of living report highlights a major problem with rental affordability in South Australia that would directly affect young people. They have said that the best thing that state government can do is invest in social housing. What do you plan to do to alleviate this issue?
Yeah, so we announced a $180 million package all orientated towards housing affordability with a big emphasis on social housing or public housing. The truth is I believe we need more public housing stock in South Australia, and I think governments of both political persuasions in the past have underinvested in this area, not just in new stock, but also in bringing existing stock up to a standard that can be utilised by people in our community who need it most. And we've got a very substantial program in that regard that we're looking forward to rolling out.
How is Labor going to help young people break into the housing market for first-time home buyers?
The South Australian Government has a program or an arm called Home Start, which is all about giving people access to home loans that otherwise might not be able to get access to it. That is very low deposit loans. We're expanding the eligibility of that for it to apply to new builds as well, which is about giving more options to young people who don't have access to the bank of mum and dad. So we know that a lot of South Australians are increasingly relying on mum and dad's equity to be able to get their home loan or get their deposit. But the truth is that for a lot of people, that's not an option. And they shouldn't be denied the opportunities to live the Australian dream. And we, for those reasons, we are making sure we increase access to Home Start finance to accommodate people in that circumstance.
In recent episodes of Wavelength, we discussed the health crisis ramping. It has been said that an extra 300 ambulances is what is needed to help, but some argue it's not ambulances, but hospital beds is where the funding should go. Ramping was a major focus in your campaign. How do you plan to minimise this issue?
Yeah, so your listeners are clearly educated, Cass, because the answer is you need both. You can't have just ambulances, you can't just have beds, you've got to have both. So we've got our policy is for 300 additional beds, 300 additional nurses, 100 additional doctors, and 350 additional ambulance officers. And each and every one of those are over and above the rate of attrition. I cancelled the funding towards the City Basketball Stadium because we just didn't see that as the right priority, and we're reallocating all that money to health, which we believe will make a material difference in fixing the crisis that we have in our state around ramping. One of the key drivers of ramping isn't just a lack of capacity in our hospital system, but a particular lack of capacity when it comes to mental health services. There are people who are in our emergency departments who are mental health patients who sometimes are stuck in there for days. Now, that's a bad outcome for that patient and also a bad outcome for our system generally because it results in bed block. So we are committed to the biggest investment in mental health services in South Australia, both in hospitals but also in community, in a generation, to alleviate the pressure on our hospital systems and in turn relieve ramping.
COVID-19 has put enormous pressure onto people, resulting in a lot of job insecurity. Industries such as hospitality and the arts have both suffered significantly during COVID due to restrictions and loss of workers. How is SA going to bring back jobs?
Young people have paid a particular big price throughout the course of COVID. The industries that have been hit hardest disproportionately employ a lot of young people. Think of hospitality and retail, for instance. But we also know there's been big implications on those people studying, whether it be at school or university. So we want to make sure we have a disproportionate investment in those industries that have done it toughest. We're doing that through our major events fund, which is a big injection in that regard. We're also doing everything we can to support the live music industry with a very substantial program of investment because that's just one example of the arts sector that has been doing it tough. So we're unapologetic about saying our COVID recovery packages are orientated to those who have been affected most.
SA homes several natural wonders. Labor has promised to protect these with plans to fight the Murray, protect our national parks, and a plan for biodiversity protection. Can you give our listeners a summary on how you plan to do this?
Well, firstly, when it comes to the Murray, the most important thing is water. And the truth is that South Australia is not getting the share of water that we're supposed to be getting under the Murray-Darling Basin Agreement. So this is a case where South Australians need to rally and indeed fight. We need to fight for our water, because if we don't, others will take it off of us. And that's an effort that I'm willing to lead on, taking it up to not just the eastern states, but also to the Commonwealth Government. But look, we've got a serious policy when it comes to climate change, which of course impacts biodiversity as well. And I want South Australia to be a world leader when it comes to the most important fuel of the future, and that's hydrogen. And we've announced our hydrogen plan, which puts South Australia at the centre of the hydrogen industry, potentially for export into the future. That's taking a bold investment on behalf of government, but one that we're wholeheartedly committed.
Fresh listeners want to know, how does bringing back Adelaide 500 and other car races conflict with your environmental policies?
We don't think it does conflict with it. When we talked about those young people who are suffering throughout the course of COVID by having a lack of work, they're in hospitality and tourism, and we know that this event is critical to generating activity within the CBD in particular, and our restaurants and bars and hotels and what have you. People talk about the impact of a few cars racing around a track. Of course, that is absolutely small beer in comparison to all of the other fossil fuels that are emitted through our economy, and the impact of the Adelaide 500 pales into insignificance in comparison to the good that we will do by seeing hydrogen power generation, which is clean and green, right here in South Australia, leading the world.
You are quite active on social media, specifically TikTok. Can we expect more politicians to join TikTok to reach their voters?
Look, social media is an important tool of the trade, and TikTok is a growing platform amongst a younger demographic, and politicians need to be accessible as part of the job. And we've had a bit of fun with it, and it's something we'll probably continue into the future.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners?
I'm 41 now, so I guess I'm younger, but for your listeners, Cass, I'm a fossil. What I'd say is that young people bring such an eternal sense of optimism and passion about what's important to them and the world around them. And what I'd say is harness that passion, thrive on that passion. The future of our planet depends upon young people caring about it. And what I see in young people is overwhelmingly a sense of duty towards the future. And that's something I really look forward to working with younger South Australians on.